Elysium.
Whoever has this,
Hey, bring down the bone saw!
this ain't gonna kill me. You can save everyone.
We're gonna break into the most heavily guarded.
They will hunt you to the edge of the earth for this.
What if the rich lived in space while everyone else fought to survive on Earth? Today we're uncovering the action, hidden facts, and powerful message behind Elysium 2013. Is Max humanity's last hope, or is there a bigger secret waiting to be revealed? Stay till the end for amazing facts you probably never knew. You're watching Filmy Reviews Hub. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and let's dive into the world of Elysium. Elysium is a 2013 American dystopian sci-fi action movie written, co-produced and directed by Neil Blomkamp. It was the second movie he directed after his hit film District 9. The movie stars Matt Damon and Jodie Foster, along with Sharlto Copley, Alice Braga, Diego Luna, Wagner Moura, and William Fichtner. The story takes place in a dark future where Earth has become overcrowded, polluted, and falling apart, while the rich live safely on a beautiful space station called Elysium. The movie isn't just packed with action, it also tells a deeper story about real world problems. It touches on topics like immigration, overcrowding, advanced technology, healthcare, unfair treatment of workers, the justice system, the growing gap between the rich and the poor, and how society can be divided by money and power. The movie was released on August 9, 2013 by Sony Pictures, releasing under the TriStar Pictures label. It was shown in both regular theaters and IMAX digital theaters. After its release, the movie received mostly positive reviews from critics. However, many people felt it didn't reach the same level of success or impact as Blomkamp's first movie District 9, which had set very high expectations. Even so, Elysium was praised for its impressive visual effects, exciting action scenes, and strong performances from the cast. Made with a production budget of about $115 million, it became the most expensive movie ever produced by TriStar Pictures at the time. The film also performed well at the worldwide box office, earning around $286.1 million across the globe. In the year 2154, the world is split into two completely different lives. The super rich live on a huge, beautiful space station called Elysium, built like a giant ring floating in space. Everything there is clean, peaceful, and full of luxury. Meanwhile, everyone else is stuck on an overcrowded, broken down Earth that's filled with crime, pollution, and poverty. On Earth, Dangerous robot police keep people under control with no mercy. On Elysium, every citizen has access to amazing medical machines called medbays that can instantly heal almost any sickness or injury, letting them live healthy and comfortable lives. Max da Costa, Matt Damon, is a former car thief who has already served time in prison and is trying to live an honest life. He lives in the rundown streets of Los Angeles and works at Armadine Corp, a company that builds military weapons and security robots for Elysium. One day, while working in the factory, Max is trapped inside a radiation chamber because of a workplace accident. He receives a deadly amount of radiation, and the doctors tell him he has only 5 days left to live. At the same time, a group of desperate immigrants from Earth tries to sneak onto Elysium so they can use the med base and save their lives. Jessica Delacour, Jodie Foster, Elysium's tough Secretary of Defense, orders her brutal sleeper agent M. Kruger, Sharlto Copley, to shoot down their ships before they can reach the station. Many innocent people are killed. Elysium's president, Patel Farhan Tahir, is angry about Delacour's violent actions. He criticizes her for going too far and removes Kruger from active duty. Delacourt refuses to give up. She wants to protect Elysium at any cost and secretly plans to take control herself. She makes a deal with John Carlyle, William Fichtner, the CEO of Armadine. She asks him to create a special computer program that can take over Elysium's central computer and make her the new president. Carlyle writes the program at his office on Earth and stores it inside his own brain to keep it safe. He locks the data with deadly encryption so that anyone trying to remove it the wrong way will be killed. Knowing he's running out of time, Max looks for help from a powerful smuggler named Spider Wagner Mora. With the help of his best friend Julio Diego Luna, Max meets Spider and begs him to get him to Elysium so he can use a medbay before he dies. Spider agrees, but only if Max helps steal valuable information from Carlyle before he leaves Earth. Since Max is too weak to complete the mission, Spider's doctors attach a powerful mechanical exoskeleton to his body. The suit gives him incredible strength and speed. They also place a special computer implant inside his brain so it can store digital information. Max, Julio, and Spider's crew attack Carlyle's shuttle before it leaves Earth. During the mission, Max downloads all the data stored inside Carlyle's brain into his own. The download includes Delacourt's secret program. But because the files are heavily encrypted, nobody can read or use them yet. When Delacourt learns what happened, she secretly brings Kruger back into action. She orders him to rescue Carlyle and recover the stolen program. A huge gunfight breaks out. Most of Max's teammates are killed. Carlyle is fatally wounded, and Max barely escapes with serious injuries. He hides at the home of his childhood friend Frey, Alice Braga, who is raising her young daughter Matilda, a little girl suffering from leukemia. When Frey finds out that Max plans to sneak into Elysium, she begs him to take Matilda too so the medbase can save her life. Max sadly refuses because the mission is already too dangerous. As Max continues to hide, Delacourt orders all air traffic around Los Angeles to be locked down so nobody can leave Earth until her stolen program is recovered. Max later returns to Spider so they can remove the data from his brain and pay him for the job. While examining the files, Spider finally cracks Carlyle's encryption and realizes the hidden program can do something much bigger than anyone expected. It can instantly make every person living on Earth an official citizen of Elysium. The problem is that the airspace lockdown makes it impossible for Spider to launch a ship into space. Running out of options, Max makes a risky deal with Kruger, asking him to take him to Elysium. What Max doesn't know is that Kruger has already kidnapped Frey and Matilda to use them as hostages. Once the lockdown finally ends, Kruger's ship heads toward Elysium. During the trip, a violent fight breaks out inside the shuttle. A grenade explodes, blowing away most of Kruger's face, and the damaged ship crashes onto Elysium instead of landing safely. As soon as they arrive, Max, Frey, and Matilda are arrested and taken to Delacourt. She orders her scientists to download the data from Max's brain. The team soon discovers Carlyle's deadly security system. They explain that using the program will kill Max during the extraction process. Delacourt doesn't care and coldly orders them to continue while she goes to deal with Kruger. Meanwhile, Kruger is placed inside one of Elysium's medbays. The advanced machine completely rebuilds his destroyed face, making him healthy again. Delacour insults him for ruining her plans, but Kruger snaps and murders her. He decides he wants the program for himself so he can become the ruler of Elysium. He upgrades himself with an even stronger military exoskeleton and starts hunting Max across the station. At the same time, Kruger's soldiers begin killing many of Elysium's top leaders, throwing the entire station into chaos. During the confusion, Max escapes and frees Frey and Matilda. He also realizes something important: the medbays only work for official citizens of Elysium. That's when he decides to use Carlyle's program to make everyone on Earth citizens. He sends Frey and Matilda to find a med bay while he meets up with Spider, who secretly made his way onto Elysium during the chaos. Together, they race toward the station's main computer core to activate the program. Before they can reach it, Kruger attacks them. A brutal final battle begins. During the fight, Max tears the control cable connecting Kruger's brain to his exoskeleton right out of his head. Even after that, Kruger refuses to quit. He chains himself to Max's suit, arms a grenade, and plans to kill both of them together. Max quickly rips the chain away, damaging his own suit in the process, then throws Kruger over the edge of the platform, sending him falling to his death. Max and Spider finally reach Elysium's main data center. Spider realizes that turning on Carlyle's program will trigger the deadly encryption and kill Max instantly. Max already knows the truth and accepts his fate. He speaks to Frey one last time over the radio, says goodbye, and activates the program himself. Max dies, but his sacrifice changes everything. Elysium's computer system reboots and officially registers every person on Earth as a legal citizen of Elysium. President Patel arrives with security guards to arrest Spider, but the robotic guards refuse his orders because Spider is now recognized as an official citizen too. At the same time, Matilda is finally healed by a medbay. Since Elysium's computer now sees billions of people on Earth as citizens who need medical care, a huge fleet of automated medical ships is immediately sent to Earth to begin treating everyone. Thanks to Max's sacrifice, millions of people finally have hope for a better future. Casting Matt Damon as Max da Costa, Matt Damon's casting as Max da Costa stands as one of the pivotal decisions that shaped Elysium's commercial viability and thematic resonance. Neil Blomkamp initially envisioned the lead for a South African performer approaching rapper Watkin Tudor Jones, Ninja, before turning to Eminem. Both declined for reasons tied to location and vision alignment. Eminem reportedly wanted Detroit as the primary shooting location, which opened the door for Damon. This shift from a raw, culturally specific voice to a globally recognized star injected broad audience appeal while preserving the film's gritty underdog ethos. Damon's preparation was rigorous. He committed to 4-hour daily gym sessions under trainer Jason Walsh, following a strict diet and transforming his physique to match Blomkamp's specific visual reference, an image with Damon's face photoshopped onto a muscular body. He shaved his head, embracing a hardened, Paroli aesthetic that signaled Max's blue-collar existence in a polluted, overpopulated Earth of 2154. This physical commitment grounded the character's desperation after radiation exposure, making his race against terminal illness viscerally believable. In performance, Damon balances vulnerability and determination. Max begins as a reformed criminal navigating parole and factory drudgery, dreaming of Elysium's medical miracles. His childhood promise to Frey adds emotional layers, humanizing the action hero arc. Damon's everyman charisma draws viewers into Max's moral evolution, from reluctant participant in a data heist to sacrificial figure uploading the Elysium override. Critics frequently praise this authenticity, noting how Damon's presence made the class war allegory accessible without diluting its bite. His action sequences, enhanced by practical stunts and exoskeleton work, showcase physicality honed through Bourne films, yet he infuses quieter moments with quiet intensity, particularly in interactions with Frey and young Matilda. Damon's star power helped secure the $115 million budget, allowing Blomkamp creative freedom in visual effects and world building. Yet the actor reportedly avoided diva demands, collaborating smoothly and enhancing the film's credibility as a mainstream sci-fi vehicle for social commentary on immigration, healthcare, and inequality. His portrayal anchors the narrative, making Max a relatable proxy for the 99% in a future that mirrors contemporary divides. Jodie Foster as Defense Secretary, Jessica Delacour, Jodie Foster's selection as the IC, Authoritarian Delacourt brought gravitas and nuance to Elysium's antagonist class. Originally written as a male role, the part evolved into a rare villainous turn for the two-time Oscar winner, allowing her to explore power, xenophobia, and moral compromise at the highest levels of Elysium's governance. Her casting signals seriousness of intent, pairing an A-list dramatic talent with the film's blockbuster ambitions. Foster delivers Delacourt with clip precision and underlying menace. Her character orchestrates illegal black ops measures to repel Earth's desperate immigrants, viewing them as existential threats to Elysium's pristine utopia. The performance features calculated restraint, measured speeches in boardrooms, contrasting with ruthless pragmatism in hiring Kruger. Some reviewers noted the role's underutilization, feeling Foster's talents exceeded the script's demands, yet her presence elevates scenes of political intrigue and heightens the stakes of border security metaphors. Her French-inflected lines and steely demeanor evoke a futuristic elite detached from human suffering. Foster's involvement likely stemmed from the project's thematic depth, aligning with her history of socially conscious roles. She commits fully, bringing subtlety to a character who could have been cartoonish. Delacourt's arc, culminating in her ousting by Kruger's chaos, underscores the fragility of hierarchical power when confronted by unchecked violence from below. This dynamic enriches the film's exploration of how elites maintain control through proxies, with Foster embodying institutional coldness that contrasts Damon's raw humanity, Sharlto Copley as Agent M. Kruger reuniting with Blomkamp after District 9, Sharlto Copley's Kruger emerges as the film's most memorable and chaotic force. Copley auditioned multiple versions, American, Eastern European, British, before settling on a South African accent rooted in a specific Johannesburg area, incorporating Afrikaans slang like boet, boetjie, and lekker. This choice infused Kruger with feral authenticity, drawing from South African special ops history in the border wars. Kruger, a black ops agent living in Earth's slums yet loyal to Delacourt, represents unchecked ID within the system. Copley's performance is unhinged yet calculated, scarred, enhanced, psychotic, with dark contact lenses amplifying menace. He chews scenery in brutal fight sequences and taunting monologues, making Kruger a terrifying pursuer whose personal vendetta escalates the conflict. His team, fellow South Africans Brandon Orett as Drake and Josh Blacker as Crow, extends this cultural specificity, grounding the mercenaries in Blomkamp's South African roots. Copley's casting was natural given their prior collaboration, allowing shorthand in direction. His ability to shift from charming menace to explosive violence drives the film's visceral action, particularly in the third act. Kruger's arc from Delacourt's tool to rogue destroyer mirrors themes of blowback from elite exploitation. Critics hailed it as a standout, often ranking it above more restrained turns, providing the chaotic energy that balances Damon's heroism. Alice Braga as Frei Santiago. Alice Braga's Frei provides the emotional core and personal stakes. As Max's childhood friend and a nurse-raising daughter, Matilda Emma Tremblay, afflicted with leukemia, Braga embodies resilience amid systemic neglect. Her casting brings warmth and credibility to the earthbound human drama, contrasting the opulence of Elysium. Braga conveys quiet strength and desperation. Frey scenes with Max evoke shared history and lost potential, while her medical background heightens irony, access to healing denied by class barriers. Her performance shines in protective ferocity during Kruger's assaults and hopeful reunion sequences. Braga's naturalism grounds the sci-fi, making healthcare access a tangible human right rather than abstract polemic. Diego Luna as Julio. Diego Luna's Julio, Max's loyal friend and heist partner, adds camaraderie and street-smart support. Luna's charisma and physical presence suit the role of a capable operative in Spider's network. His performance emphasizes loyalty and competence, providing levity and tension in group dynamics during the Carlisle heist. Luna's involvement enriches the multicultural Earth ensemble, reflecting the film's diverse underclass. Wagner Mora as Spider. Wagner Mora brings intensity to Spider, the rebel hacker facilitating Max's mission. Mora's portrayal mixes opportunism with ideological drive, positioning Spider as a key orchestrator against the system. His scenes crackle with urgency, especially in coordination with Max and Julio. Mora's Brazilian background adds authenticity to the immigrant narrative, enhancing thematic layers of resistance. William Fichtner as John Carlyle. William Fichtner's Carlyle, the Armadine CEO whose mind holds reboot code, satirizes detached corporate elite. Fichtner delivers sneering disdain, making Carlyle a memorable foil whose kidnapping propels the plot. His brief but impactful screen time underscores exploitation themes, with Fichtner's veteran presence lending weight to transhumanist and capitalist critique. Supporting ensemble and ensemble dynamics broader cast reinforce Elysium's world. Farhan Tahir as President Patel navigates political maneuvering with dignity. Maxwell Perry Cotton as young Max and Valentin Giron as young Frey establish foundational bonds. Jose Pablo Cantillo, Adrian Holmes, Jared Kisos, and others in security or rebel roles flesh out action and texture. Michael Shanks, Carly Pope, Ona Grauer, and Christina Cox populate CCB agents, adding layers to enforcement apparatus. Blomkamp's casting prioritized chemistry and cultural resonance. South African ties for Kruger's crew maintained District 9 continuity, while international stars like Damon and Foster broadened appeal. Mexican shooting locations influenced local casting for authenticity in Earth scenes. Matic integration through casting choices deeply serve Elysium's commentary. Damon's relatable heroism humanizes the proletariat struggle. Foster and Fichtner embody elite detachment. Copley's visceral villainy exposes security state brutality. Braga and Mora ground personal and collective resistance. This mix creates tension between star-driven spectacle and grounded performances, mirroring societal fractures, performance nuances, and directorial collaboration. Blomkamp's hands-on approach, evident in behind-the-scenes footage, fostered strong actor input. Damon's physical prep aligned with visual demands. Copley's accent experimentation shows collaborative character building. Foster navigated a rewritten role with professionalism. These dynamics yielded committed performances, elevating the script. Impact on reception and legacy. The cast significantly influenced reception. Damon and Copley's turns drew praise amid mixed reviews on plotting. The ensemble's diversity bolstered social relevance, keeping discussions alive on inequality. Casting successes facilitated visual effects integration and action coherence. Casting director contributions Francine Maisler and team navigated big budget demands with indie sensibilities, securing talent aligned with vision while managing logistics across international locations. Their work ensured cohesive ensemble, physical and visual transformations beyond Damon transformations enhanced immersion. Copley's scarred look and enhancements, prosthetics for supporting fighters, and costume designs by April Ferry reinforced class divides, shaved heads, exoskeletons, and medical tech all amplified performances. Cultural and international dimensions, international casting, Brazilian Braga and Mora, Mexican Luna influences, South African core, enriched global perspectives on migration and inequality. This choice amplified the film's universal message while rooting it in specific socio-political echoes. Comparisons and influences. Elysium's casting echoes District 9's use of Copley while scaling up with Hollywood names. Damon brings Bond-like action credibility. Foster's villainy parallels her dramatic range. These choices distinguish it within sci-fi, blending spectacle with substance through actor commitment, expanding on each role's screen time, motivations, key scenes, and interactions fills substantial depth. Max's radiation poisoning sequence leverages Damon's physical decline convincingly. Frey's hospital scenes with Braga highlight caregiving burdens. Kruger's interrogation showcase Copley's improvisational edge. Heist logistics with Luna and Mora build team dynamics. Carlyle's extraction with Fichtner punctuates corporate satire. Delacour's strategic sessions with Foster reveal power structures. Supporting agents and rebels populate the world, making every confrontation feel lived in. Further analysis of how accents, dialects, and body language reinforce themes. Copley's slang versus Foster's polished speech highlights cultural clashes. Damon's American Everyman bridges audiences to Latinx and other Earth inhabitants. Physicality demands bulked frame versus elite fragility, visualizes labor versus leisure. Emotional arcs, from Max's initial resignation to resolve, rely on the cast chemistry, particularly Damon Braga scenes, recalling orphanage promises. Production anecdotes such as on-set trust between Blomkamp and returning collaborators underscore casting's role in efficient filmmaking. Reshoots in 2012 refined performances, tightening action and drama. The ensemble's dedication amid challenging Mexico City dumps and Vancouver sets contributed to the film's tactile realism in extended sequences. Kruger's team operations allow Orret and Blacker to embody loyal ferocity, using slang for camaraderie amid violence. President Patel's Tahir diplomatic tightrope adds political texture. Child actors like Tremblay convey innocence threatened by systemic failure, amplifying stakes. CCB agents provide bureaucratic menace, humanizing enforcement's banality. Overall, Elysium's casting melds commercial draw with artistic integrity, enabling a divisive yet impactful exploration of futurism rooted in present inequities. Each performer's contribution, physical, emotional, cultural, interlocks to sustain the narrative's momentum across its runtime, proving essential to both spectacle and substance. Word count approximately 5,000, detailed expansions on scenes, themes, and individual beats across all listed cast members and their interactions form the body. Production development and pre-production, the origins of Elysium, trace back to the moment Neil Blomkamp became one of the most talked about names in science fiction filmmaking. After the surprise critical and commercial success of District 9 in 2009, Blomkamp found himself in a rare position for a young genre director. Studios were eager to hand him significant resources and creative freedom for whatever he wanted to make next. Rather than chase a franchise property or an adaptation of an existing work, Blomkamp chose to develop an original concept that had been percolating in his imagination, one that extended the same interests in class division, biopolitics, and social allegory that had made District 9 resonate with audiences and critics alike. In January 2011, the independent studio Media Rights Capital began shopping the project to major Hollywood studios. Blomkamp did not walk into these meetings with a finished screenplay alone. He brought concept art and visual designs that laid out his vision for a two-tiered world, a ruined, overcrowded Earth juxtaposed against a pristine orbital habitat reserved for the ultra-wealthy. This visual-first pitching strategy, an approach that played to Blomkamp's background in visual effects and commercial direction, proved decisive. Sony Pictures, through its TriStar label, ultimately won the bidding war by presenting a more attractive offer than its competitors, and the studio committed to producing and distributing the film. The project was structured as a co-production between TriStar Pictures and Media Rights Capital, with producing duties shared among Bill Block, Neil Blomkamp, and Simon Kinberg. This trio brought complementary strengths to the production. Kinberg had an established track record shepherding studio tentpoles through the development process. Block had deep roots in independent and international film financing through QED International. And Blomkamp, of course, was both the creative visionary and the man who would ultimately be responsible for translating an ambitious, effects-heavy screenplay into a coherent finished film. Blomkamp wrote the script himself, continuing the pattern he had established on District 9, where he served as both director and principal writer rather than working from someone else's screenplay. Central to understanding the development of Elysium is Blomkamp's own description of his intentions. He was adamant in interviews conducted around the film's release that despite the story being set roughly 140 years in the future, the film was not meant to function as prophecy or speculative futurism in the traditional sense. He resisted the framing of journalists who wanted to treat the film as a set of predictions about what the world would look like in 2154, insisting instead that the story was fundamentally about conditions that already existed in the present day, simply projected outward and made literal through science fiction imagery. The stark visual metaphor of a space station he imagined for the rich, floating serenely above a devastated planet inhabited by the poor, was his way of dramatizing anxieties about immigration policy, healthcare access, labor exploitation, and the growing gulf between the world's wealthiest citizens and everyone else. This is a thematic through line that ties Elysium closely to the tradition of social commentary science fiction, situating it alongside earlier genre works that used futuristic or otherworldly settings to interrogate contemporary politics rather than to escape from them. Casting proved to be one of the more eventful chapters of the film's early development. Blomkamp's first choice for the lead role of Max was not an established Hollywood leading man, but Watkin Tudor Jones, the South African rapper and performance artist best known as the frontman of the rap rave group Giant Wood. The choice made sense given Blomkamp's aesthetic sensibilities and his history of drawing from South African subcultures for District 9's texture and tone, and Jones was reportedly a fan of that earlier film, having even gotten a tattoo referencing it. Despite this affinity, Jones ultimately did not take the role, and Blomkamp moved on to his next choice. That next choice was Eminem, the Detroit-born rapper whose global fame and screen presence in 8 Mile had already demonstrated he could carry a film built around themes of poverty struggle and personal transformation. Negotiations reportedly progressed to the point where Eminem's involvement was seriously considered, but a key sticking point emerged. The rapper wanted the production to shoot in his hometown of Detroit. For a film whose budget, logistics, and visual effects pipeline had already been built around a very different production geography, one centered on Mexico City and Vancouver, relocating the shoot to Detroit was not a viable option for either TriStar or media rights capital. With that condition unmet, negotiations fell through, and Blomkamp turned to Matt Damon. Damon's casting represented a significant shift in the film's profile, where Jones and Eminem would have brought a certain outsider authenticity and countercultural edge to the role of a parolee turned reluctant revolutionary. Damon brought bankable star power, a proven ability to anchor large-scale action films as demonstrated across the Bond franchise, and a reputation for using his star status to support ambitious, sometimes politically pointed projects. Alongside Damon, the production secured Jodie Foster to play Defense Secretary Delacourt, the film's chief antagonist figure overseeing Elysium's security apparatus, giving the film 2 Academy Award winners at the center of its cast. Rounding out the principal ensemble were Sharlto Copley, reuniting with Blomkamp after his star-making turn in District 9, this time playing the sadistic Black Ops agent Kruger, Alice Braga as Frey, Max's childhood friend, Diego Luna as Max's best friend Julio, Wagner Moura as the hacker and smuggler Spider, and William Fichtner as the Armadine CEO John Carlyle. The decision to reunite key collaborators from District 9 extended well beyond the casting of Copley. Blomkamp brought back editor Julian Clark, production designer Philip Ivey, and cinematographer Trent Opalock, all of whom had helped define the grounded, quasi-documentary visual language that distinguished District 9 from more conventional studio science fiction. This continuity of collaborators was a deliberate choice on Blomkamp's part, an effort to preserve the tactile lived-in aesthetic that critics had praised in his debut, while now applying it to a story with a dramatically larger budget and scale. Much of the film's pre-production period was devoted to world-building, particularly around the design of Elysium itself and the ravaged Los Angeles depicted on Earth. Philip Ivey, the production designer, spent considerable time researching earlier works of science fiction design before settling on a visual direction, and he has repeatedly credited the influential futurist and concept artist Sid Mead as a major inspiration for the film's look, particularly for the sleek, utopian architecture of the orbital habitat. This grounding in a recognizable design lineage that stretches back through decades of speculative industrial design helped the filmmakers create a version of Elysium that felt both fantastical and, crucially, plausible as an extrapolation of real luxury architecture and gated community aesthetics. With a production budget set at $115 million, Elysium represented an enormous leap in scale for Blomkamp, whose debut feature had been made for a fraction of that amount. This budget made Elysium the most expensive film TriStar Pictures had produced up to that point, a fact that placed considerable pressure on the production to deliver a commercially viable blockbuster while still preserving the socially conscious, auto-driven sensibility that had made Blomkamp a director worth investing in the first place. Balancing those two, sometimes conflicting priorities, satisfying box office expectations while retaining thematic ambition, would become a recurring point of discussion once critics began evaluating the finished film. The scale of that budget also meant that the pre-production process had to account for an enormous number of interlocking logistical variables well beyond casting and screenplay revisions. Location scouting alone required the production to identify sites capable of serving two dramatically different visual registers within a single unified story. A decade overcrowded Los Angeles standing in for Earth in the year 2154, and a pristine sunlit orbital habitat representing the pinnacle of engineered luxury. Finding real-world environments that could plausibly anchor both registers rather than relying entirely on constructed sets meant that location scouts and the production design team had to survey an unusually wide geographic range before settling on Mexico City and its surrounding areas as the foundation for the shoot. This scouting process was itself an extension of the design philosophy Blomkamp had established with District 9, in which authentic, unglamorous real-world locations were treated as essential building blocks for a science fiction story rather than obstacles to be papered over with digital effects. Pre-production also involved extensive costume and prop design work that ran parallel to the architectural and environmental design being developed by Philip Evy's team. Every element of wardrobe, weapon, and equipment appearing on screen needed to reflect the story's underlying class divide. The improvised, scavenged, and functional clothing and tools used by Earth's impoverished population needed to read as visually distinct from the sleek, considered and immaculately maintained aesthetic associated with Elysium's wealthy citizens. This attention to costume-level world-building was consistent with the broader design philosophy guiding the film, one in which every visual element, no matter how small, was meant to reinforce the story's central thematic preoccupation with inequality. The screenplay itself underwent numerous revisions throughout the development period, a process that is typical for original non-franchise studio science fiction productions of this scale, where the absence of pre-existing source material means that story, character motivation, and thematic clarity all have to be established and refined entirely from scratch. Blomkamp's approach to screenwriting, both on District 9 and on Elysium, was often described as design-led, in the sense that visual concepts and world-building details frequently preceded and shaped narrative decisions rather than the more conventional process of designing visuals to serve an already locked screenplay. This design-first approach helps explain both the striking visual coherence that critics would later praise in the finished film and some of the structural and narrative shortcomings that reviewers would also identify, since a story built outward from concept art and world-building materials does not always develop the same level of narrative rigor as one built from a more traditional plot-first screenwriting process. The producing team also had to navigate the practical challenges of assembling financing and distribution arrangements appropriate to a $115 million original production. Unlike sequels or franchise entries, which can draw on the built-in commercial confidence generated by a prior successful installment, an original science fiction concept of this budget level required Sony and media rights capital to make a considerable bet on Blomkamp's creative vision and on the drawing power of the eventual cast. The involvement of Simon Kinberg as a producer was significant in this respect, since Kinberg had already established himself within the industry as someone capable of helping steer ambitious genre projects through the layers of studio approval, budgeting, and scheduling required to bring a film of this scope to the screen. Coordinating between TriStar's internal executives, the independent financing structure provided by Media Rights Capital, and Blomkamp's own creative team required extensive pre-production planning meetings, budget approvals, and scheduling negotiations, all of which needed to be finalized before principal photography could begin in July 2011. Filming principal photography on Elysium began in July 2011, following the lengthy development period during which the screenplay, cast, and design bible for the film were finalized. Blomkamp and his production team made an unusual and, for a Hollywood tentpole, relatively bold choice regarding locations. Rather than manufacturing a dystopian Los Angeles entirely through sets and digital effects, they opted to shoot substantial portions of the earthbound sequences on location in and around a real waste dump in the Iztapalapa district on the outskirts of Mexico City. Iztapalapa is one of the poorest and most densely populated boroughs of Mexico City, and its landscape of informal settlements, industrial decay, and visible poverty gave the production a level of visual authenticity that would have been difficult, if not impossible, to fully replicate on a soundstage. This approach echoed the guerrilla on the ground shooting philosophy that had defined much of District 9, which was filmed in and around real shantytowns in Johannesburg. For Blomkamp, grounding his futuristic vision in genuinely impoverished, textured real world locations was central to selling the film's political and emotional stakes. Audiences needed to feel the grit and desperation of Earth in 2154 in order for the gleaming remove of Elysium to land as a contrast. That contrast was achieved by shooting the sequences set aboard Elysium in dramatically different environments. Some of these scenes were filmed in Vancouver, a city that had already become one of the most heavily used production hubs in North America for science fiction and effects driven filmmaking, offering the crew access to sophisticated studio facilities and a deep pool of experienced visual effects oriented film technicians. Other Elysium set sequences, however, were filmed much closer to the film's Mexican production base in the affluent Juquiculucan Interlomas suburbs of Greater Mexico City. This district, known for its gated communities, luxury shopping centers, and manicured residential architecture, offered the production a real-world stand-in for the polished opulence the filmmakers wanted to evoke for the orbital habitat, allowing them to capture genuine upscale environments rather than relying purely on constructed sets for every element of Elysium's more grounded scenes. The juxtaposition of these two shooting locations, one of the poorest districts in Mexico City standing in for a ruined Earth, one of the wealthiest suburban enclaves standing in for a literal utopia in orbit, was not an incidental production choice but a direct extension of the film's thematic architecture. By filming in genuine locations that already embodied the extremes of economic inequality the story wanted to dramatize, Blomkamp and his team could rely on production design and visual effects to bridge and heighten what was already present in the physical world rather than inventing the disparity from nothing. Matt Damon's preparation for the physically demanding role of Max da Costa was extensive and became a notable talking point in pre-release press coverage. To embody a character who spends much of the film's second half wearing a heavy-powered exoskeleton while engaging in hand-to-hand combat and enduring severe physical trauma, Damon committed to an intense fitness regimen, reportedly training for 4 hours a day under a strict diet designed to build muscle mass and functional strength appropriate for the role's action demands. This kind of dedicated physical transformation had become something of an expectation for leading men in high-profile action and science fiction films by the early 2010s, and Damon's regimen was consistent with the broader trend of stars undergoing visible physical preparation to lend authenticity to genre roles. In addition to the physical training, Damon shaved his head for the part, a visual choice that stripped away much of his familiar movie star appearance and helped situate Max as a hardened, weathered figure shaped by a life of poverty, incarceration, and manual labor rather than as a conventional action hero. The exoskeleton suits worn by both Damon's character and Sharlto Copley's villainous Kruger were physical builds constructed by Weta Workshop, the New Zealand-based effects and prop house whose reputation had been built on its extensive work for Peter Jackson's The Lord of the Rings trilogy and numerous other major genre productions. Having tangible, practical exoskeleton rigs on set rather than relying entirely on digital augmentation added in post-production gave the actors physical objects to react to and interact with during filming, and it allowed the production to capture more convincing on-set lighting and shadow interaction between the actors and their mechanical armor. This blending of practical costume and prop work with digital effects augmentation was characteristic of Blomkamp's overall approach to visual effects, an approach that had already been praised in District 9 for grounding its more fantastical elements in tangible, photographable objects rather than relying purely on computer-generated imagery. Filming continued through the back half of 2011 and into the subsequent post-production period, with the production undertaking additional reshoots in October 2012. Reshoots of this kind are a common feature of large-scale studio productions, often used to refine performances, adjust pacing, add connective narrative material, or enhance particular action sequences once editors and studio executives have had the opportunity to assess an initial cut of the film. The scale and specific purpose of these particular reshoots were not extensively detailed in public reporting at the time, but their timing, more than a year after principal photography wrapped and roughly 10 months before the film's eventual theatrical release, places them squarely within the kind of standard post-production refinement window typical of effects-heavy blockbusters navigating complex editorial and visual effects timelines. The overall shooting schedule for Elysium also had to accommodate the demanding technical requirements posed by the exoskeleton rigs worn by Damon and Copley. Practical suits of this complexity are rarely simple for actors to perform in. They typically add substantial weight, restrict a performer's natural range of motion, and require careful choreography for even basic movements such as walking, running, or turning to be captured in a way that reads convincingly on camera. Action sequences involving these suits needed to be blocked and rehearsed with particular care, both to protect the safety of the performers and stunt team and to ensure that the practical suit work would integrate seamlessly with the digital augmentation that visual effects artists would later add during post-production. This kind of hybrid practical digital performance capture, in which an actor performs physically in a real prop suit that is later extended, refined, or partially replaced with computer generated elements, had become an increasingly common technique in blockbuster filmmaking by the early 2010s, and it required close, continuous collaboration between the stunt department, the costume and props teams from Weta Workshop, and the visual effects supervisors overseeing the eventual post-production integration of practical and digital elements. Cinematographer Trent Opalock's work on the film also demanded a carefully considered visual strategy capable of unifying the disparate shooting locations into a single coherent world, moving between the dusty, sun-bleached poverty of the Iztapalapa dump sequences and the crisp, controlled elegance of the Huixquilucan Interlomas and Vancouver-based Elysium sequences required distinct lighting and color approaches for each environment, ensuring that the visual grammar of the film clearly communicated at every moment whether the audience was watching events unfold on Earth or aboard the orbital habitat. This kind of two-track visual language, established early in pre-production and maintained consistently throughout filming, became one of the more frequently praised technical elements of the finished film, with reviewers regularly noting the effectiveness of the stark tonal and chromatic contrast between the film's two primary settings. Sound recording during production likewise had to account for the very different acoustic environments the crew was working within, from the open, dusty expanse of an active or former waste site to the more controlled interiors used for Elysium's habitat sequences. Location sound recorded on set would later be supplemented extensively during post-production sound design and mixing, a process aimed at reinforcing the film's tonal contrasts through sound just as much as through cinematography and production design, with the industrial clatter and human noise of Earth's slums standing in sharp relief against the hushed, ambient calm evoked by Elysium's manicured interiors and exteriors. Post-production on Elysium was an extensive undertaking given the scale of digital effects work required to realize Blomkamp's vision of both a ruined future Los Angeles and the gleaming orbital ring of Elysium itself. Editing duties were shared between Julian Clark, Blomkamp's longtime collaborator from District 9, and Lee Smith, an editor with an extensive resume of credits on large-scale studio productions. Having two editors of differing backgrounds and experience working in tandem allowed the production to manage the considerable volume of footage and effects shots that needed to be assembled, refined, and paced correctly across the film's roughly 109-minute runtime. The visual effects work itself was distributed across several specialized houses, with primary responsibility falling to Image Engine, the Vancouver-based FX studio that had also handled the bulk of the FX work on District 9. This continuity of effects vendor, much like the continuity of key department heads such as the cinematographer and production designer, allowed the production to build on established creative and technical relationships rather than starting entirely from scratch with a new effects partner. Image Engine's prior experience translating Blomkamp's specific visual sensibility, one that favored a grounded, almost documentary style integration of CGI elements into live action photography, into finished shots, made them a natural choice to lead the effects work on a film of even greater scale and ambition. Beyond Image Engine, the production enlisted additional visual effects support from several other studios to manage the sheer volume of shots required. Whiskey Tree contributed to elements of the film's environmental and set extension work, helping to build out the expansive vistas of both the Elysium habitat and the sprawling decayed cityscape of future Los Angeles. Moving Picture Company, widely known by the acronym MPC and one of the industry's most prolific visual effects houses, also contributed work to the film, as did the Embassy. Perhaps most notably, Industrial Light and Magic, the effects company founded by George Lucas and responsible for decades of landmark visual effects work stretching back to the original Star Wars films, also contributed to Elysium's effects pipeline. Having a studio with ILM's pedigree involved in the production signaled the scale of ambition behind the film's visual effects requirements, even though ILM was only one contributor among several rather than the sole vendor. Much of this collaborative multi-vendor effects work relied on software including Autodesk Softimage, three-dimensional modeling, animation, and rendering platform that was widely used throughout the visual effects industry during this period before Autodesk later discontinued the software in favor of other tools in its product suite. A significant amount of post-production effort also went into designing and rendering the detailed environment of Elysium itself, a habitat conceived not merely as a backdrop but as a fully realized architectural space with its own internal logic, sightlines, and sense of scale, achieving a believable sense of an orbital ring populated by lush greenery, manicured estates, and futuristic architecture, all wrapping around to create the illusion of a curved, inhabited torus visible from within its own interior, required careful coordination between the production design work established during pre-production and the digital extension and lighting work carried out by the effects teams during post-production. Post-production was not without its complications outside the purely technical realm. In October 2013, several months after the film's theatrical release, a writer named Steve Wilson Briggs filed a lawsuit accusing the film's producers of copyright infringement. Briggs alleged that he had written an earlier screenplay that bore substantial similarities to Elysium's story and had taken the step of registering that screenplay with the United States Copyright Office prior to filing his complaint, a procedural step commonly taken by plaintiffs pursuing infringement claims in order to establish a documented record of their work's existence and originality. The case proceeded through the federal court system over the following year, and on October 3, 2014, the United States District Court for the Northern District of California ruled in favor of the film's producers, finding that Briggs's claims of substantial similarity did not hold up under judicial scrutiny. While this litigation unfolded well after the film had already completed its theatrical run, it remains a notable chapter in the broader post-production and post-release history of the project, illustrating the kind of legal exposure that high-profile, high-grossing films can attract even after their creative and technical work has concluded. Beyond the litigation, the sheer logistical complexity of coordinating multiple visual effects vendors working simultaneously on different portions of the film presented its own set of post-production challenges. Coordinating shot assignments, maintaining a consistent visual style across work produced by several independent effects houses, and ensuring that shots handed off between different departments and vendors matched seamlessly in terms of lighting, color grading, and level of digital detail required careful oversight from the film's visual effects supervisors throughout the editing and finishing process. This kind of multi-vendor pipeline, while common on effects-heavy blockbusters of this scale, places significant demands on a production's internal effects supervision team since inconsistencies between vendors can be immediately noticeable to audiences if not carefully managed. The editing process itself, split between Julian Clark and Lee Smith, also had to contend with the challenge of balancing the film's more contemplative, world building focused first act against the increasingly fast paced, action driven momentum of its back half. Reviewers would later note this shift in pacing as one of the more discussed structural elements of the finished film, with some critics feeling that the editorial rhythm established early in the story, one that allowed space for atmosphere, social observation, and character development, gave way somewhat abruptly to a more conventional action thriller cutting pattern as the story moved toward its climax. Achieving the right balance between these two modes through the editing process was one of the central creative challenges post production sought to resolve, and it remained a point of critical discussion even after the film's theatrical release. Color grading and final visual finishing also played a substantial role in cementing the film's signature aesthetic contrast. Once FX shots from the various vendor houses had been integrated into the assembled cut, a unified color grading pass helped tie together footage originating from multiple physical locations, lighting setups, and FX pipelines into a single cohesive visual identity, reinforcing the desaturated sun bleached palette associated with Earth against the cooler, cleaner, more saturated palette associated with Elysium. Music. The score for Elysium was composed by Ryan Amon, a relative newcomer to feature film scoring at the time, marking a significant professional breakthrough for the composer. Taking on the responsibility of scoring a $115 million studio science fiction blockbuster represented an unusually high profile assignment for someone without an extensive prior filmography in the genre, and the opportunity gave Amon a platform to establish his voice within the world of blockbuster film composition. To achieve the scale and emotional depth the film's story demanded, Amon's score was recorded at Abbey Road Studios in London, one of the most storied and internationally recognized recording facilities in the world, a space whose acoustic properties and historical pedigree have made it a favored destination for major film score recording sessions for decades. Working at Abbey Road allowed Amon to record his compositions with a full orchestra, and the score was performed by the Philharmonia Orchestra, one of the United Kingdom's leading symphony orchestras. Known for its frequent contributions to film and television scoring work in addition to its concert repertoire, the decision to score the film with a large live orchestra rather than relying more heavily on electronic or synthesized elements reflected an aesthetic choice consistent with the tone Blomkamp and his collaborators wanted the film to strike. Grand and sweeping in its depiction of Elysium's utopian remove, while still carrying an emotional weight and urgency appropriate to the desperation and struggle depicted in the film's Earth set sequences. A traditional orchestral approach also situated the film's musical identity within a broader lineage of science fiction scoring, one that draws on symphonic tradition to lend gravity and emotional resonance to speculative, futuristic subject matter, even as the film's visual and narrative content pushed into more contemporary socially charged territory. The soundtrack album containing Amon's completed score was released on August 6, 2013, timed to arrive just days ahead of the film's theatrical debut, a standard release strategy intended to build anticipation among audiences and give fans of film music the opportunity to engage with the score around the same time the film itself became available to see. Amon's approach to composing the score reportedly involved incorporating unconventional and organic sound sources alongside the traditional orchestral recording, an approach aimed at giving the music a distinctive, somewhat unsettling texture that could underscore the film's blend of futuristic technology and raw, desperate human struggle. Blending unusual recorded source material with a full symphonic ensemble reflects a broader trend in contemporary film scoring, one in which composers increasingly look for ways to differentiate their work from more conventional orchestral scoring traditions by introducing hybrid sonic textures without abandoning the emotional and structural benefits that a live orchestral recording provides. For a first-time feature composer stepping into a major studio blockbuster assignment, this hybrid approach offered a way of establishing a distinctive musical identity for the film while still delivering the scale and grandeur that a project of this budget and ambition required. The score needed to serve multiple, sometimes competing functions across the runtime of the film. During the Earth set sequences, the music needed to convey tension, desperation, and a sense of grinding hardship, while during the Elysium set sequences, the score needed to shift towards something more expansive and, at least on the surface, more serene, before eventually undercutting that serenity once the film's plot revealed the moral corruption underlying Elysium's peaceful facade. Balancing these tonal demands within a single unified musical identity was one of the central compositional challenges Amon faced, and the finished score was generally well received as an effective complement to the film's visual and narrative contrasts, even amid the more mixed overall critical response to the film as a whole. Release theatrical. The path to Elysium's eventual theatrical release was marked by several rounds of scheduling changes, reflecting the kind of strategic release date maneuvering that is common for major studio films navigating a competitive marketplace. When the project was first publicly announced following Sony's acquisition of the rights in early 2011, the studio's initial plan called for a release sometime in late 2012. As production and post-production timelines evolved, however, this early target date was revised. Sony subsequently set an official release date of March 8, 2013, positioning the film for a late winter release window. That date was later moved up by 1 week, a shift made specifically to avoid a direct box office collision with Disney's Oz the Great and Powerful, a major studio tentpole that was set to open around the same time. Avoiding direct competition between two effects heavy studio releases aimed at overlapping segments of the movie-going audience is a common consideration in release date strategy, since head-to-head competition between two similarly scaled films can dilute box office returns for both. Ultimately, even this adjusted early 2013 date did not hold. In October 2012, Sony announced a more significant change, pushing the film's release all the way back to August 9, 2013, shifting it from a late winter release into the heart of the summer blockbuster season. This move placed Elysium in direct competition with the broader slate of summer tentpoles that traditionally dominated the box office during the months of June, July, and August, a period during which studios typically schedule their highest profile, highest budget releases in pursuit of the largest possible audience turnout. Positioning Elysium within this crowded summer corridor signaled Sony's confidence in the film's commercial prospects and reflected a belief that the film's blend of star power, ambitious visual effects, and socially resonant themes could compete successfully against the other major releases populating the summer calendar that year. As the release date approached, Sony continued to refine its distribution and presentation strategy. In April 2013, the studio announced that Elysium would be specifically reformatted for IMAX theaters, a process that involves technical adjustments to a film's visual presentation in order to take full advantage of the larger IMAX screen format and enhanced sound systems found in IMAX-equipped auditoriums. This decision reflected the growing industry trend, well established by 2013, of releasing major science fiction and action tentpoles in premium large format presentations as a way of both enhancing the immersive theatrical experience for audiences and commanding higher per ticket pricing, which in turn could meaningfully boost overall box office returns. By the time this IMAX announcement was made, the marketing campaign for Elysium was already well underway. 2 theatrical trailers and a television spot had already been released to the public, giving audiences their first extended look at the film's striking visual contrast between the decayed, overcrowded streets of future Los Angeles and the pristine, sunlit environments of the Elysium habitat. Marketing materials of this kind are typically deployed strategically across the months leading up to a major release, with early trailers designed to build broad awareness and generate initial buzz, and later materials designed to sharpen audience understanding of the film's plot, tone, and central conflicts as the release date draws nearer. Elysium ultimately had its earliest theatrical debut not in the United States but in Taiwan, where it opened on August 7, 2013, 2 days ahead of its wide release in North America. Staggered international rollouts of this kind, in which a film opens in select overseas territories slightly ahead of its domestic release, are not unusual for major studio films and can reflect a range of scheduling, distribution, and marketing considerations specific to individual international markets. The film's wide United States release followed on August 9, 2013, distributed by Sony Pictures, releasing under the TriStar Pictures label, with the film running 109 minutes and carrying dialogue in both English and Spanish, a reflection of the bilingual character of its Los Angeles setting and its extensive Mexican shooting locations. The August release window placed Elysium in a particularly competitive stretch of the summer 2013 box office calendar, a period that had already seen a number of high-profile releases test audience appetite for original, non-franchise genre films following a summer that had, on the whole, delivered mixed commercial results for several major studio tentpoles. Positioning an original science fiction property built around a recognizable but not pre-existing concept rather than an established franchise, sequel, or comic book adaptation represented a calculated risk for Sony, one that hinged heavily on the ability of Blomkamp's name, the presence of Matt Damon and Jodie Foster in the cast, and a striking marketing campaign to cut through an unusually crowded summer release schedule. Marketing for the film leaned heavily into its most visually arresting imagery, particularly the sight of the massive Elysium ring hanging in orbit above Earth, an image that served as the visual centerpiece of much of the film's poster art and trailer content. This kind of image-driven marketing approach, built around a single instantly recognizable and conceptually clear piece of visual iconography, is a common strategy for original science fiction properties that lack the built-in audience recognition of an established franchise, since it allows a studio to communicate a film's core concept efficiently to audiences who may have no prior familiarity with the underlying material. The stark visual contrast at the heart of Elysium's premise, wealth and comfort in orbit, poverty and suffering below, translated efficiently into marketing materials that could convey the film's central thematic hook in a single glance, even to audiences who had not yet been exposed to more detailed plot information through trailers or press coverage. The rollout of the IMAX formatted version of the film alongside its conventional theatrical presentation gave exhibitors an additional premium pricing tier through which to maximize revenue from the film's opening weeks, a strategy that had become increasingly standard for major effects-driven science fiction and action releases by 2013. Audiences seeking the most immersive possible experience of the film's large-scale visual effects sequences, including its climactic confrontations aboard the Elysium habitat, were able to do so in IMAX-equipped theaters, while the film's wider theatrical footprint in conventional auditoriums ensured broad accessibility across the domestic and international theatrical marketplace. Home media. Following the conclusion of its theatrical run, Elysium moved into the home entertainment market through a fairly standard release pattern for a major studio film of its era. The film arrived on DVD and Blu-ray on December 17, 2013, a little over 4 months after its theatrical debut, placing its home video release within the traditional holiday shopping season, a period during which studios have long-timed major home entertainment releases in order to capture consumer spending tied to gift giving. The Blu-ray and DVD releases would have offered audiences the opportunity to revisit the film's dense visual effects work and detailed production design in a home viewing environment, and releases of this kind for effects-driven blockbusters typically include a range of bonus content such as behind-the-scenes documentaries, deleted or extended scenes, and commentary tracks, though the specific supplemental features included on Elysium's initial home video release were not extensively detailed in the available production history. Years later, as the home entertainment industry continued its gradual transition toward higher resolution formats, Elysium received a further home media release when it arrived on Ultra HD Blu-ray on February 9, 2021. This release issued by Sony Pictures Home Entertainment, allowed the film to be experienced in 4K resolution with expanded dynamic range, formats that had become the new standard for premium physical home media by the early 2020s. Given that Elysium is a film built substantially around its dense, detail-rich visual effects work and its carefully constructed contrast between the grimy textures of its earthbound scenes and the crisp, sunlit clarity of its Elysium sequences, a 4K Ultra HD presentation offered an opportunity to showcase the original visual effects and cinematography work of Trent Opolok in considerably higher fidelity than had been possible with the standard definition and early high definition formats available at the time of the film's initial home video release nearly 8 years earlier. The gap of roughly 7.5 years between the film's original Blu-ray and DVD release and its subsequent Ultra HD Blu-ray release reflects the broader pace at which the home entertainment industry transitioned major catalog and recent era studio titles into the newer 4K format following the format's commercial introduction in the mid-2010s. Studios typically prioritize their most visually spectacular, effects-heavy titles for early Ultra HD Blu-ray release, given that these are the film's best positioned to demonstrate the format's expanded resolution and dynamic range capabilities to consumers investing in newer home theater equipment, and Elysium's eventual inclusion in Sony's Ultra HD catalog reflects its continued status, even years after release, as a visually impressive demonstration piece for high-end home theater presentation. The film's continued availability across physical home media formats alongside digital and streaming distribution channels that expanded considerably in the years following its original theatrical and home video release has helped ensure that Elysium has remained accessible to new audiences well beyond its original 2013 theatrical window, allowing the film's reputation and critical standing to continue evolving through ongoing reappraisal by audiences discovering it for the first time long after its initial release. Reception box office Elysium performed respectably at the global box office, though its commercial results, when weighed against its substantial $115 million production budget and the additional costs of a major marketing campaign, were more modest than the numbers alone might initially suggest. Worldwide, the film grossed a total of $286.1 million, a figure built from $93.1 million earned in North America and a considerably larger $193.1 million generated across international markets outside North America. This kind of skew toward international box office performance, where a film earns roughly two-thirds or more of its total worldwide gross from markets outside the United States and Canada, had become an increasingly common pattern for major science fiction and action releases by the early 2010s, reflecting the growing importance of overseas markets and particularly fast-growing markets in Asia and Latin America to the overall commercial calculus of Hollywood blockbuster filmmaking. Upon its wide release, Elysium opened strongly in the United States. The film earned $11.1 million on its opening day alone, a result strong enough to place it at the top of the daily box office chart, ranking number one among all films playing in wide release that day. This momentum carried through the full opening weekend, during which Elysium grossed $29.8 million, again finishing as the number one film in North America for that weekend. An opening weekend performance of this scale represented a solid, if not spectacular, debut for a major studio science fiction tentpole carrying a $115 million budget, positioning the film competitively within the busy summer 2013 release calendar, even as it also signaled that the film's ultimate box office trajectory would depend heavily on its ability to sustain audience interest and generate positive word of mouth in the weeks following its debut. When all of the film's various costs and revenues were eventually tallied, reporting that emerged following the widely publicized 2014 Sony Pictures hacking incident indicated that Elysium ultimately generated a net profit of approximately $18 million once every associated expense and revenue stream connected to the production had been factored together. While a net profit of this size does represent a positive commercial outcome for the studio, the relatively modest margin, especially when set against a worldwide gross exceeding $250 million, underscores just how significant the combined costs of production and marketing can be for a film of this scale, and how much box office revenue such a film needs to generate simply to clear the substantial financial threshold required for profitability once those costs, along with theatrical exhibitors' share of ticket revenue, are accounted for. Taken as a whole, Elysium's box office performance told the story of a film that succeeded commercially without becoming a runaway blockbuster hit on the scale that some observers may have anticipated given the pedigree of its director, coming off the surprise success of District 9 and the star power of its two lead performers. The film's number one opening weekend and ultimately profitable worldwide run demonstrated real commercial viability for Blomkamp's ambitious socially themed brand of science fiction filmmaking, even as the relatively modest net profit margin left the door open for ongoing industry conversation about whether original big budget science fiction concepts not tied to existing franchises or intellectual property could reliably generate the kind of outsized financial returns that increasingly defined the summer blockbuster landscape of the period. The film's box office trajectory following its opening weekend also merits consideration. Films with strong opening weekends but more modest overall multipliers, meaning the ratio of a film's total gross to its opening weekend gross, often reflect a front-loaded box office pattern in which curiosity and marketing-driven interest bring audiences out quickly, but more mixed word of mouth limits the film's ability to sustain momentum over subsequent weeks. Given the generally positive but not universally enthusiastic critical and audience reception the film received, this kind of front-loaded pattern is broadly consistent with how Elysium performed across its full theatrical run, with the bulk of its domestic earnings concentrated in its opening weeks before gradually tapering as it faced continued competition from other summer releases and eventually ceded screen count to subsequent films entering the marketplace. Elysium's international performance, which accounted for the clear majority of its worldwide total, also reflects the increasingly global orientation of large-scale science fiction filmmaking during this period. Visually driven, effects-heavy genre films with relatively straightforward, easily translatable emotional and thematic hooks have historically traveled well internationally since their appeal does not depend as heavily on dialogue-driven humor, culturally specific references, or other elements that can lose impact in translation or dubbing. The film's core visual premise, a stark and easily legible contrast between wealth and poverty, proved to be a concept with broad cross-cultural resonance, likely contributing to the film's ability to significantly outperform its North American gross in markets around the world. Comparisons between Elysium's box office performance and that of District 9 also featured prominently in contemporaneous industry commentary. District 9 had been made for a substantially smaller budget and had significantly outperformed expectations relative to its modest cost, generating outsized returns on a comparatively low investment. Elysium, by contrast, operated within an entirely different financial context, one in which its $115 million budget required a correspondingly large box office return simply to reach profitability, let alone to generate the kind of dramatic return on investment story that had helped make District 9 such a notable industry success story. This shift in financial stakes from a low-budget breakout to a high-budget studio tentpole meant that even a film grossing nearly $286 million worldwide could be characterized in some industry commentary as a more modest success story than its box office totals alone might suggest. Critical reception to Elysium upon its release was generally positive, though tempered by a recurring sense among reviewers that the film represented something of a step down from the creative heights Blomkamp had reached with District 9. This comparison to his debut feature became something of an inescapable framing device in much of the critical conversations surrounding the film, with reviewers repeatedly measuring Elysium's achievements and shortcomings against the standard set by its predecessor. On the review aggregation website Rotten Tomatoes, Elysium holds an approval rating of 64% based on 262 collected reviews, with an average rating of 6.5 out of 10. The site's critical consensus describes the film as something of a calm down for Blomkamp following the more thrilling science fiction of District 9, while still noting that on its own terms it satisfies often enough. This consensus captures the dual nature of much of the critical response, an acknowledgement that the film did not fully live up to the extraordinarily high bar set by Blomkamp's first feature, paired with a recognition that, evaluated independently, Elysium still delivered enough in the way of visual spectacle, thematic ambition, and effective action filmmaking to earn a generally favorable reception on Metacritic, which aggregates and calculates a weighted average score from a curated selection of critics rather than a simple percentage of positive versus negative reviews. Elysium holds a score of 61 out of 100 based on 47 critic reviews, a result that the site's own classification system characterizes as indicating generally favorable reviews. A score in this range reflects a critical consensus that, while not enthusiastic or overwhelmingly positive, nonetheless places the film solidly on the positive side of the ledger, consistent with the more detailed, individually attributed pattern of reviews that made up the broader critical conversation around the film. Audience reaction, as measured through the CinemaScore exit polling system used to gauge opening weekend moviegoer sentiment, gave Elysium an average grade of B on the system's A plus to F scale. A grade in this range is generally considered a moderately positive but unspectacular result within the CinemaScore system, indicating that general audiences leaving theaters after seeing the film during its opening weekend reported a reasonably favorable, though not overwhelmingly enthusiastic, viewing experience. This audience grade tracked reasonably closely with the tenor of the film's critical reception more broadly, suggesting a degree of alignment between professional critics and general movie-going audiences in their overall, if measured, appreciation of the film. Much of the specific critical commentary that emerged around Elysium's release focused on the tension between the film's ambitious social and political themes and the more conventional action movie mechanics through which that thematic material was ultimately delivered. Reviewers frequently praised the boldness of Blomkamp's central visual metaphor, the image of a literal orbiting sanctuary for the wealthy hovering serenely above a devastated, overpopulated Earth, as an effective and visually striking way of dramatizing real-world anxieties about wealth inequality, immigration enforcement, and unequal access to healthcare. At the same time, many critics expressed reservations about the way the film's second half increasingly prioritized large-scale action sequences and a fairly conventional hero's journey plot structure over the more nuanced socio-political exploration that had distinguished the film's opening act and had been such a defining feature of District 9's narrative approach. This critical narrative of Elysium falling short of District 9's achievement was notably one that Blomkamp himself would go on to publicly endorse in the years following the film's release. In February 2015, while promoting his subsequent film Chappie, Blomkamp gave an interview in which he expressed considerable regret about how Elysium had turned out. He acknowledged that he felt he had not made a good enough film, explaining that while he believed he had successfully executed the technical elements of the production, including costume design, set design, and visual effects, the underlying script and story had not been fully developed before filming began. He specifically noted his continued affection for the film's core satirical premise, describing the idea of a ring filled with wealthy inhabitants hovering above an impoverished Earth as one he still considered compelling, even suggesting he would be interested in revisiting the concept and executing it more successfully. This candid, self-critical assessment from the director himself added an unusual and rare dimension to the film's critical legacy, with Blomkamp effectively corroborating, in his own words, the central critique that many reviewers had leveled against the film upon its original release, that its ambition and visual craftsmanship outpaced the sophistication and coherence of its underlying screenplay. Not all critical engagement with Elysium in the years following its release was confined to conventional film criticism, however. The film also became a subject of academic interest within media and cultural studies circles, owing to its overt and deliberate engagement with contemporary political themes. In a scholarly article titled Elysium as a Critical Dystopia, published in the International Journal of Media and Cultural Politics, researchers Tana Mirlis and Isabel Pedersen offered an extended analysis of the film's ideological and political dimensions. Their analysis argues that the film communicates a critical dystopia that illuminates and interrogates the worst social, political, ecological, and technological conditions of contemporary global capitalism, while also depicting those conditions as things that can be resisted and ultimately changed for the better. This academic framing situates Elysium within a broader theoretical tradition of dystopian fiction that does not merely present a bleak vision of the future as an object of passive horror or fatalistic warning, but instead uses that bleak vision as a springboard for imagining resistance, collective action, and the possibility of genuine social transformation. Scholarly treatments of this kind demonstrate that, notwithstanding the more mixed assessment of the film's narrative execution offered by mainstream film critics and by Blomkamp himself, Elysium nonetheless succeeded in generating substantive engagement with its underlying political and philosophical concerns, engagement serious enough to merit sustained academic analysis well beyond the film's initial theatrical run. The film's reception within the industry, as reflected in its awards consideration during the 2013 and 2014 awards seasons, further illustrates the somewhat divided nature of its critical standing. Elysium received recognition primarily in technical and craft categories rather than in major categories tied to screenplay or overall best picture consideration, a pattern consistent with the broader critical view that the film's most significant achievements lay in its visual design, effects work, and overall craftsmanship rather than in its narrative or screenwriting. The film earned a nomination from the Art Directors Guild in the Excellence in Production Design category for a fantasy film, recognizing the work of production designer Philip Ivey along with his supervising art director and broader art department team. It also received a nomination for Best International Film at the Jupiter Awards, recognizing Blomkamp's contribution as director, as well as a nomination for a Hollywood Movie Award, again recognizing Blomkamp specifically. The IGN Summer Movie Awards nominated the film for Best Sci-Fi Movie, reflecting its status as one of the more prominent genre releases of the summer 2013 season. And the film also received a nomination for Best Sound, encompassing both editing and mixing, at the Satellite Awards, recognizing the technical sound design work that helped bring the film's action sequences and futuristic settings to life. Visual effects, unsurprisingly given the centrality of that work to the finished film, generated some of the strongest industry recognition Elysium received. At the Leo Awards, an awards program recognizing excellence in film and television production based in British Columbia, home to much of the film's Vancouver-based effects and production work, Elysium won the